There was an undeniable energy in the air when they first met. It wasn't just attraction, it was magnetic. He had noticed her from across the crowded cafe, her laughter cutting through the noise like a melody that lingered long after the notes had faded. She seemed completely at ease, unaware of the way she lit up the room. He watched her, not in a way that felt intrusive, but with a quiet curiosity. There was something about her presence that made everything else seem dull by comparison. She, on the other hand, had been drawn to him almost without realizing it. Among the chatter and clinking of coffee cups, his quiet intensity stood out. There was a stillness to him, a subtle confidence that intrigued her. His eyes, deep and steady, held hers for just a second too long, and in that moment, the world seemed to shift. When they finally spoke, the connection was instant. Words came effortlessly, as though they had always known each other. There was no need for pretense or small talk. Every exchange felt meaningful, as if they were uncovering little pieces of a shared puzzle. Their first touch was accidental, a brief graze of fingers as he handed her coffee. But it was electric. The jolt that shot through them both was undeniable. Lust, fiery and consuming, took hold in those early days. Every glance, every smile, every accidental touch seemed to fan the flames. Yet beneath the intensity, there was something quieter, something deeper. It wasn't just about the way they made each other feel. It was the way they wanted to know each other. In moments of silence, where words weren't needed, their hearts seemed to speak in a language neither fully understood. Could this be love, or was it just a fleeting illusion? It wasn't long before the lines between love and lust began to blur. In those early days, lust had been the undeniable force driving them together, igniting a passion that left them breathless and eager for more. But as the rush of physical attraction began to settle, something deeper started to stir. Moments of stillness between them grew heavier, with unspoken questions, and they both felt the quiet pull of emotions they hadn't yet dared to name. They spent more time together, exploring each other's worlds. He learned about her love for stargazing and the way she collected memories in the form of little trinkets and photos. She discovered his passion for music and how his favorite songs were less about sound and more about stories. These glimpses into each other's lives were intimate in a way that went beyond touch, and it scared them both. Doubts began to creep in during those quiet moments. Were they mistaking infatuation for something more meaningful? The intensity of their connection had felt like a whirlwind, but now they were standing in its aftermath, trying to make sense of the mess it had left behind. He worried about losing himself, about letting down walls he had carefully built over the years. She wondered if the spark they felt was enough to sustain them, or if it would eventually burn out. One evening, after a night of laughter and stolen kisses, they found themselves sitting in silence. The question that had been building for weeks finally slipped out. "What are we doing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," he admitted, the vulnerability in his tone surprising even himself. "But I don't want it to end." It was a fragile truth, and it hung between them like a delicate thread, waiting to either unravel or grow stronger. The rain fell steadily that afternoon, drumming softly against the windows of the small bookstore where they had taken refuge. Outside, the world was a blur of gray, but inside, The warmth between them was unmistakable. They wandered through the aisles together, occasionally pulling books from the shelves to share a line or a passage. It was a quiet moment, devoid of the usual intensity that had defined so much of their time together, but it felt significant in a way neither could explain. She stopped suddenly, her eyes fixed on a quote printed in bold letters on a page. "To love is to recognize yourself in another." The words struck her, as if they were speaking directly to the questions she had been wrestling with. Without thinking, she turned to him and showed him the passage. "Do you think that's true?" she asked, her voice filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. He took the book from her hands and read the words slowly. He didn't answer right away, instead letting the weight of the question settle. Finally, he looked at her, his gaze steady. "I think love isn't about finding someone who completes you," he said. "It's about finding someone who inspires you to be whole on your own, and then choosing to share that with them." His words hung in the air, a quiet revelation. In that moment, they both understood that love wasn't something that happened passively. It wasn't a tidal wave that swept you away, but a choice. A deliberate act of faith and vulnerability. That night, as they walked home under the pale glow of streetlights, they talked openly about their fears and hopes. They realized they didn't have to abandon the fiery passion that had brought them together. Instead, they could let it coexist with the tenderness that was now taking root. Lust had ignited their connection, but love would sustain it, grounding them in something real. As they stood outside her door, the rain still falling softly around them, they lingered for a moment, their hands intertwined. This was their beginning, not perfect, not certain, but honest. And that, they decided, was enough.